You know that person who, the moment the sky goes gray, something in them settles? Not gets sad, settles. Like something they'd been bracing against all week just finally stopped pushing. They open a window. They make something warm to drink. They don't reach for their phone to check if plans are canceled. They're hoping they are. If that's you, here's what other people have probably said: that you're antisocial, that you're moody, that there's something a little off about preferring the gray sky to a bright one. The world tends to frame rain as an obstacle. You've always experienced it as a signal. And the question isn't why you love it. The question is what that love is actually telling you about how your system is built. Most people assume that loving rainy days is about mood, that you're drawn to something melancholy, something low. The research says the opposite. People who are most drawn to rain tend to have nervous systems running hotter than average, not colder. Rain isn't pulling them towards sadness. It's finally matching the environment to what their system actually needs. Here's the part nobody warned you about. What looks like a weather preference is actually a regulation strategy, and it's been running quietly in the background for a long time. The term psychologists use is sensory processing sensitivity. It means your nervous system picks up more detail, more texture, more emotional signal from everything around you than most people register. You notice the shift in light before a storm arrives. You feel the pressure change. You read the emotional temperature of a room before anyone has spoken. This isn't sensitivity in the everyday sense, meaning fragile. It's sensitivity in the technical sense, meaning high resolution. You are receiving more input all the time. And a world that is loud, bright, and socially demanding is a significant amount of data to carry across a full week. Rain cuts that input. It softens edges. It lowers the visual contrast of everything around you. It replaces unpredictable noise with one consistent, steady sound. Your nervous system isn't retreating when it rains. It's finally getting the conditions it needs to function without constantly working against its environment. The first layer is about permission. There's a particular kind of person who finds it genuinely difficult to stop, not because they don't want to, but because stillness, without a clear reason, carries a background weight. They're always in the middle of something unfinished. There's always a message open, a task not completed, something owed to someone. Rain closes that. Plans cancel without confrontation. Social expectations lower on their own. The world contracts to wherever they happen to be sitting. Elaine Aron, whose decades of research defined sensory processing sensitivity as a measurable trait, found that high-sensitivity individuals absorb and process significantly more environmental information than average, which means they accumulate mental fatigue at a much rapid rate than their peers. Rain isn't laziness for these people. It's the only socially acceptable pause that doesn't require an explanation. And here's the second layer most people miss. Rain produces what acousticians call pink noise, a sound profile that distributes energy evenly across the full frequency spectrum, similar to the ambient sound environment inside the womb. Research in environmental psychology, including work referenced by acoustic scientist Julian Treasure, shows that consistent, non-threatening sound at this frequency measurably reduces cortisol, the hormone your body uses to sustain a stress response. When it drops, your muscles soften, your jaw unclenches, your thoughts stop competing with each other for the front of the line. You aren't romanticizing the rain. Your nervous system is using it, the same way it uses sleep. Not for what it represents, but for what it does to your physiology the moment it begins. You trained your body to associate that sound with being okay, and every time it rains, that training switches on. So, let's say this directly. You were told you were too sensitive, too introverted, too inside your own head, that preferring gray skies meant something was wrong with your relationship to the world, that normal people didn't need rain the way you did, and that said something unflattering about you. None of that was true. What was actually happening, your nervous system was calibrated to a higher resolution than the people around you. You were processing more detail, more emotional data, more of everything, and a world built for average input levels was constantly running louder than your system could absorb without cost. Rain was one of the few things that matched where your nervous system actually lives. You weren't escaping, you weren't being dramatic, you were regulating, doing exactly what a high-sensitivity system needs to do to stay functional in an environment that was never quite built for it. You never needed the rain to calm down. You needed the world to. And that's not a flaw. That's not a preference. That's a nervous system that knows what it requires. Here's what actually governs this. People with higher sensory processing sensitivity don't just prefer quieter environments. They tend to think more carefully before acting, process experiences more deeply after the fact, and consistently notice details that others overlook entirely. These aren't separate traits. They're the same system running at a different threshold. The love of rain belongs in the same category as needing more time alone after a social event, preferring smaller gatherings, or noticing when the lighting in a room shifts. These aren't quirks. They're the same calibration expressing itself across different contexts. And the reason rain feels personal, the reason it feels like it was made for you specifically, is because in a functional sense, it was. Your system found something that works. That's not a coincidence. That's pattern recognition. You never needed the rain to calm down. You needed the world to. And the fact that you found something that does that, quietly, reliably, every time the sky changes, is not a small thing. If this landed, here's the question for the comments. Is your love of rainy days more about how it feels inside or how it makes the outside world finally feel manageable? I want to know which one hits first. If this explains something you've never had words for, subscribe. That's what every video on this channel is trying to do. Next video, why some people find it almost impossible to ask for help, even when they're drowning. If this one made sense to you, that one is the next chapter.